This first assignment for Drawing 2 is basically a review of everything we learned in Drawing 1. And I call this the linear design apple composition. And we're going to do a drawing of 5 apples. And this drawing we're going to use for our first project, Project 1. So it's very important that you do a good job on this so that we can further this design for another project. So right now I have the apples laid out. You need to use 5 apples, and I want to make sure you don't line them up like in a row. Try to create a dynamic composition where there's 1 or 2 apples that are near the viewer and others that are traveling further back in the space, so we get a back and forth dynamism within the design. All right, that being said, when I'm trying to get a kind of a spontaneous composition, I will put my 5 apples in the bag that they came in. I just buy the bargain apples, and I sort of roll them out of the bag to try to get a sense of randomness to the placement, and then I will manipulate the composition and move some of the apples. And make sure that you get certain apples overlapping. Like if you look at mine, I have certain apples in front of other ones. That creates an immediate feeling of depth. And also be conscious of the shadow patterns, the cast shadow patterns, because you're going to want to add those to your composition. And so let's begin, okay? So if you remember, we used the 5 strategies in Drawing 1. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with that axis where my apples are placed. I want to get a sense of it. So think of the core of the apples, and then I'm going to use my short straight lines. To get a sense of the shape of them. Make sure you get the overlaps. This one I'm moving. All right, so axis, short straight lines. And then you can add the cross contours. Okay, I know this apple in the back is going away from me. This one's slightly going away from me. This one is turned more towards me than away from me. This one is tilted slightly towards me. This one. Okay, so add those cross contours. And then examine the size. Make sure that the apples aren't getting too large, because that would bring them forward of the picture plane. And don't make them too small, because then it's hard to believe that they are actually apples and not cherries. Okay? And next, we're going to do our comparisons. So if you remember right, with the comparisons, we do vertical, horizontal, and proportional. Okay? So let me first do the horizontal comparison, since this is pretty much a horizontal composition, okay? So I've got my comparison stick. It can be anything that's straight, spoon handle, or this is a brush handle. Okay, what I see is either one of these has to go up or down. So I'm going to bring this one actually down a little bit. So that's one of my comparisons, my horizontal comparisons, okay? And let me see what else I can do. Okay, that cuts through the same line, cuts through this apple right about there, and how does it work with, in this one, it cuts at the core. So this one I have to raise up a little bit, okay? So I'm going to raise this one up, okay? So remember those are horizontal and vertical comparisons. Let me do a couple of verticals. Okay. Vertical's a little more difficult because I don't have a lot of overlap. This cuts into the cast shadow of this one, which that looks good. This one cuts in there, that's about right. Maybe I'll shift this ever so slightly over here, okay. All right, so remember to do your comparisons. And next we're going to work on value, right? And I'll cover this a little bit more next time. But remember, we need at least 5 values, okay? And so there's the cast shadows. All right, let's do those. I'm working rather quickly. I would spend a little more time on the shape of my apples, but I'm moving rather fast right now. So cast shadows, then your form shadows. So cast and then form, which are the ones that run along the form of your apple to give it its 3-dimensional quality, okay? The form shadow, all right? And this is the cast shadow. So try to get all that blocked in. Make sure that your apples are in the correct position and the correct size. If you remember, doing the correct size of comparisons is proportional. It would be like me comparing this front apple to the back apple. So let me try that. So my front apple compared to my back apple, this one is ever so slightly higher than this one, which is exactly the way I have it, okay? So this apple, top to bottom, as compared to this apple, is slightly taller than the far one. And that makes sense. This apple's closer to me. The apple further within the composition is further away. Okay, so it's going to be smaller. All right? And then I would take this and maybe compare this one or that one or these 2 apples together to compare the proportion. And that lays the groundwork for the beginning of this drawing. And next we'll get into some drawing techniques.